Hi and welcome to my channel, Things a Dad Should Know. Thanks for joining me today. So my family likes sauerkraut, and one of the things with sauerkraut is that sauerkraut can actually be very high in probiotics. And so we often make it here, and if you're buying sauerkraut for probiotics at the shopping centre, a couple of things to know about it. One, if it's not in the cold section, it doesn't have live cultures. Anything that's in the warm section, so in other words, not refrigerated, it means that they've actually used it in a heat bath to actually both sterilize it and seal it. So the ones that have got the cultures are the ones that are going to be in the cold section. So what I found was there was a recipe online, and I'll put the link in there, but it's Holly Howe, how to make sauerkraut, and she makes one called DillyKraut, and it's basically just sauerkraut with dill, and my family love it. So let me take you through some of the tools you'll use for this. If you choose to do it. It can be as simple or as difficult as you want. There's 1,000 different ways to do this. So let me take you through what I've got here and explain some of it to you. Okay, for the bare minimum to make sauerkraut, you're going to need cabbage, which you're going to cut up. You're going to need some salt. I use Himalayan pink salt or natural real salt, both of which are mined salts versus salts made from salt water. And then I use organic dill weed when I'm making it. Now, there's the 3 simple ingredients that are going to go into it. That's all it takes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shred the lettuce into small pieces. The simplest way to do that, if you don't have any tools, is just use a knife and shred it. I use a mandolin. And I've got, I do this a lot, so I've actually got this, and I use it for chips, I use it for carrots, I use it for making all sorts of things, but really, really good for making sauerkraut. You're going to need a mason jar so that you can put it into, and you're going to need a cutting board to cut it up on. Now what I'm going to do is, once I've shredded this, I'm going to put it into salt here, and I'm going to mix it at a ratio of 1 tablespoon of salt to 800 grams of shredded cabbage. And then I'm going to take that shredded cabbage and let it sit for 10-15 minutes so that it will actually absorb the salt and get some moisture out of the actual cabbage. And then I'm going to take it and compact it into here. So you'll need something to compact it into here. Now you can buy these online. They're just basically things that allow you to press down. This is probably my favorite. It's got a small end and a big end. I kind of like that. And then what we'll do, or what you would do, is on top of that, you would take one of the first leaves of lettuce, cabbage that you took off, and you would push it down under the water and seal it there. Now to seal it there, again, there's many ways you can do it. You can use something like a pickle pebble, and it's basically just a piece of heavy glass, a piece of heavy glass, which you'll put in here. It fits through the top perfectly, and you'll sit it on top of the top cabbage leaf, and that will hold it under. Then the last thing you're gonna need is a way to actually ferment it. So the most normal way that people have done it is to use this, which is just an airlock fermenter. Because I do it all the time, I've tried a number of different types. When you get your cabbage, what you're looking for is something that feels impressively heavy for the size of it. And what they will tell you is it has a high moisture content inside the actual cabbage itself. Years ago, I found a company that made something specifically for making sauerkraut like this. And effectively, it's a sleeve which what you put into it, and the fingers will hold the cabbage under the water, and you can adjust the height by how far in you screw the actual top device here. What you do with this is you actually load it into a little loader like this. It'll squeeze into the loader like this, and then effectively this sits on top of the actual glass jar, and when you push it down, you can see all the fingers are compressed. The fingers will come out and reach out and grab all the sauerkraut and push the sauerkraut right down into the container. You'll need a scale to make sure that you know exactly how much it's going to weigh, and you'll need a container to put it into. The first thing we want to do is just take off the outer layer of cabbage leaf. So I'll usually take off the first 1 or 2 layers, and then if you don't have if you didn't get one of these containers or catchers that I'm using over here, the next layer down, what I want to do with it is I want to take off 1 more layer, but I want to try and take it off intact so that when I put it into the actual container, I can put this layer on top of it. So I'm going to just take it off from here. I'm going to use a knife to cut the actual around here so I can lift it off. And try and get as much as I can off in a singular piece. So there's a good piece there I can use. I can just push that in on the top and push it down and hold it down. I'll put that over here so I can show you that as we go. All right, next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take the bottom of it off. Then I'm going to halve the cabbage. Then what you'll find is inside the cabbage, you can see this hard piece here. So I want to get rid of this hard piece. And in fact, for an organic cabbage, this is very tightly packed. So it's really, really good. So I'm just going to take my knife and cut a triangle out of it. And that's going to take this piece of hard, thick core out. So I don't have that to deal with. Now, if I don't have, from here, I'm going to cut this into thirds. Mostly because I'm going to put it onto the mandolin. But if you didn't have a mandolin, what you would do is you would just turn this over and start cutting thin slices off this. And you'll see it's giving me a nice little pieces of cabbage in here. And that's exactly what I'm after. Now, before I started, I made sure my bench was very, very clean. You don't want to get contaminants into your sauerkraut. So, all right, the mandolin is a little bit easier. So we have a mandolin holder, we have a holder. I can put the cabbage on top. I'm going to set the height on this just to 1. And then I can take my mandolin thing. And so you'll see it's pretty much done the same thing. It's just cut it into small pieces for me. Now, it's 1 tablespoon to 800 grams. So what I tend to do, just because I find it mixes a lot better, is I'll put this on and I'm going to put this in. So I want to get to 680 grams of cabbage before I'm ready to move on to the next step into what I'm doing. So usually you'll find about half to 3/4 of a cabbage is what's going to be 800 grams if it's a good sized cabbage. All right, that's sitting at 680 there. So what I'm going to do, even though I'm going to do 1 tablespoon to 800 grams, what I'm going to do, another device I didn't remind you of, is I'm going to grab a ½ tablespoon measure, and I'm going to take my Himalayan pink salt. Now, all salts are not the same when it comes to it. The one salt you can't use on this is table salt because it has iodine in it. So you need to make sure that whatever salt you use is an iodine-free salt. Because this is a mineral salt, which means it actually has minerals as well as the salt, it needs just a little bit more than a tablespoon. So you'll see I'm giving it a little bit of a heaping. It needs about 10% more than just the standard tablespoon. If you're using natural salt, normal salt, real salt, kosher salt, then you would just use the ½ tablespoon. So I'm going to mix in that ½ tablespoon. I'm going to do the same with the dill. I'm going to mix in ½ tablespoon of dill. Mix it on. Then I'm just going to give it a little bit of mix, so I'm mixing the bottom half of this with the salt and the dill. Now, you'll see it breaks, how it breaks. It's still very crisp. The actual cabbage itself is crisp and will snap. So what's going to happen is as it draws the moisture out, it's going to become sloppy and flexy and very mushy. At the moment it's dry and it's bouncing around like a fresh lettuce. Once I'm finished, it'll be more like a soggy lettuce as when it's done. All right, let's get the other 800 grams in there. All right, so now the 800 grams plus 200, so I'm going to go to 1,040 grams is where I want to get to. These mandolins are really, really sharp, so always make sure you keep your fingers away as much as you can from touching it. That's why I'm using the actual mandolin driver. the more you push firmly in one go, the more chance it has of getting it in there properly and cutting it up properly. All right, so we're now sitting at exactly 800 grams. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the second half tablespoon, which will give me my 1 tablespoon. A touch more because it was flat. Add another half tablespoon of dill. And we're going to mix it up again. And what we're trying to do is make sure we get the salt and the dill across all of the cabbage, so it's all covered in both of them. The dill will give it the flavour, the salt will give it the liquid it needs to be able to ferment in. All right, so you remember it's still crispy. These pieces are still crispy. So we're going to let it sit for probably 10 or 15 minutes, and then while I'm waiting for that to go, I'll get the other cabbage, cut it up and put it into another container, and I'll see you shortly. So it's been about 15 minutes since we did this one. So when you look at it, you'll see it's now very limpy, doesn't snap like it did before, and it's very moist. Have a little bit of a closer look, you can see it's got a lot of moisture in it now. It's just dragged all the moisture out with the salt, and that's exactly what we wanted it to do. So you'll see it glistening, and as long as it's doing that, then it's ready to be put into the actual container. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to put it into one of these containers. The colour of the container is irrelevant, it doesn't make any difference because it's going to be inside the entire time. But let's do this one here first so you can see it. All right, this is a granite top. Granite top is very slippery. So I just went to the local hardware store and bought some of the draw liners, cut it into a circle, and I put it on there so it doesn't move around when I do this part. Again, we've got this nice and mushy now. I gave an extra 10 minutes just to make sure it got even more mushy, and you can see it's like very much like soggy cabbage. So one way you can do this is just pick it up and put it into the jar. It works fine. If you don't want to invest, then that's the best way to do it. I bought a little funnel, which is specifically made for the mason jars. And what you can do with these is you can just basically put it in the top. Shove it through. So fill the jar up as much as you can. When you first start, you'll be amazed. You'll look at this and say, there's no way I'm going to get this all into the jar. So one of the reasons I like this one is because it just happens to be the same size as the opening in the funnel. So I'm going to push that through. Now what I'm going to do is going to take this end and I'm going to put a lot of pressure on it. I'm going to push it all down to the bottom as hard as I can. And that's why I put the mat on the bottom here to stop it from slipping out underneath it. And I'm not sure if you can hear that, but you can hear a little bit of moisture in the actual bowl. And what you're going to find is by the time I get to the end of it, it's going to have created the exact recipe for brine that we need without actually having to add brine. So let's put the rest of it in. What you'll start to see is coming up the side here is the brine. And that's just the brine coming out of the cabbage. So 800 grams of cabbage will pretty much fit perfectly and fill a mason jar. Now in the bottom, I'm not sure if you can see it there, but you'll see that's the brine that's actually come out of the cabbage. So I'm going to add all of that in there, including the brine. And the brine is what you actually ferment the cabbage in. All right, so we've got all that in there. Push it down. Right, then what you would do here is you would take your cabbage leaf, if this is what you're using, and you would slot it in over the top here like that. Tuck it in. And then if you have a pebble or something else you can use, and you can actually use a small jam mason jar to fit on the top of it, it'll actually work as well. You're just going to put that on top like that and let it sit down, and we'll hold everything underneath the water. I'm going to use this, so I'm going to load it. And in here it's loaded, so all the fingers are pulled back. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically spin this down. Okay. Put it in, set it on top, and I'm going to push it from the top. And what it's going to do is all the fingers are now inside there, and I'm just going to push it slowly in there, and it will put all of the cabbage under the brine. So I'm lifting the actual, unscrewing the knob up a little bit just so I can push it down a bit further. And then you'll see just on the inside there, it's sitting in there, it's holding it all down. So it's underneath the level. So I'm going to take that. Now I'm going to grab my lid. In this situation, I'm using the one I showed you. I'm going to make sure it's sealed and make sure I have the actual gaskets in there so that it seals correctly. I'm going to screw it on, take my little pump, and I'm just going to suck the air out of it. Okay. And what you want to do is you want to let that sit for about at least 1 to 3 weeks, and you want it to sit in room temperature. So I'm just going to put it over here, and I let them sit there for 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'll come back in 2 to 3 weeks, put it into the refrigerator for a day, and then it's ready to eat. Okay, so here we are with the finished product. That's the first one we did. The second one I put into a blue jar. You'll see the third one, this is where that fingers come in really handy, so it can hold it right down. It's only half a jar. I've used this one here because it doesn't have any chance of overflowing. Hopefully you get a chance to make this and enjoy it. If you do, leave me a comment, like, subscribe, and I'll look forward to catching up with you on the next one.